They call me a failure, not in hushed tones or behind closed doors. No, her family was the type to say things out loud, always with a smile that dared you to challenge them. Her mother called it honesty. Her brother preferred straight shooting. I called it something else, quietly, to myself, in the bathroom mirror after every family gathering where I was reminded, in not-so-subtle ways, that I didn't belong. I met Rachel in college. She had this wild confidence about her, like the world had always opened doors just to see her smile. I was the opposite. Grew up quiet, worked 2 jobs during undergrad, took out more loans than I care to remember. I didn't have a name that meant anything. No trust fund. Just a determination that bordered on obsession. Rachel saw something in me. Or maybe she liked being with someone who adored her the way I did. I don't know. Looking back, it's hard to tell where love ended and admiration began. But I loved her. God, I did. Enough to sit through dinners where her father would ask if I'd ever considered a real job. Even while I was coding the early prototypes of what would later become the company that changed my life. Enough to smile politely when her brother joked that Rachel had always liked to fix broken things. The worst part? I laughed too. Not because I thought it was funny, but because I didn't want to make her choose between me and them. I thought I could prove myself eventually. Thought if I just worked harder, they'd see it. Turns out, proving yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you is a fool's errand. We got married after college. Small ceremony. Rachel wore her grandmother's earrings. Her dad footed most of the bill, but made a show of reminding me what it cost. I didn't care. I was in love. I thought love was enough. It wasn't. The company started small. Just me, a friend from college, in a basement. Long nights, cheap coffee, late rent payments. Rachel was supportive at first, or at least she said she was. She'd roll her eyes when I talked about the vision, but she didn't leave. That counted for something, right? I remember the exact moment I knew we weren't going to make it. Her mom was visiting, and I was walking them through a prototype, a clean, functional interface I'd been refining for weeks. Rachel didn't even look up from her phone. Her mom sipped her wine, looked around the cluttered living room, and said, "You know, Rachel, not everyone is meant to be with someone entrepreneurial." I didn't say a word. Rachel didn't defend me. She just smiled. We divorced 3 years later. It was mutual on paper, but in reality, I signed the papers with a kind of grief that had nothing to do with losing her and everything to do with losing the version of myself I thought I was building with her. The ink had barely dried when the whispers started. Rachel's brother told anyone who'd listen that I was washed up. Her father told my former in-laws I was still chasing pipe dreams. I heard it all. I listened, and I went quiet. That's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you room to grow in the shadows. The company didn't just survive. It exploded. I brought in a CTO with the vision I lacked in certain areas. We scaled. We pivoted. We landed a contract with a global logistics firm, then another with a financial institution. Suddenly, the kid with the laptop in his basement was flying business class and turning down VC money because I didn't need it. I built holding companies, trusts, strategic partnerships. I kept my name off most of the documents, stayed quiet online. I didn't want flash. I wanted freedom. And I got it. 5 years after the divorce, I stood at the top of a staircase that curved through the center of a home they said I'd never own. A mansion, really, stone facade, vaulted ceilings, heated floors, a backyard that overlooked the city like a king surveying his domain. It wasn't just wealth. It was proof. That's when the idea came. Not out of pettiness. Okay, maybe a little, but mostly out of a need for closure. I needed to look those people in the eyes again. The ones who told me I'd never make it. The ones who made me feel small, who laughed while I sat silently, swallowing my pride like medicine. I planned a barbecue. Not just any barbecue. An event, catered by a private chef. Tables set with custom monogrammed napkins. A string quartet for ambience. Imported wines. I even had lawn games imported from Italy, because if you're going to be dramatic, go all in. And the invitations? Gold foil seals. Heavy cardstock. Embossed lettering. The kind of invitation you don't throw away because it feels expensive to touch. Each one signed. With warmth, from the failure you once knew. I sent them to every member of Rachel's family. Her parents. Her brother and his smug wife. Even her cousin Jeremy, who once told me I had ambition in the eyes but poverty in the bank. I didn't invite Rachel. This wasn't about her anymore. The RSVPs came in slowly. Curiosity got the better of them. They didn't know where I lived now, didn't know what I'd become. The address was listed with only a location pin. When they arrived, there were valet attendants in pressed uniforms. They were ushered through the front gate, past the fountain, down the stone path into the backyard. And there I stood, in a tailored suit, not because I wanted to show off, but because I wanted to look like the man I had become, the one they never thought I'd be. Her father saw me first. He froze, hand still on his wife's elbow. This is your house. I smiled. Just the backyard for now. Thought it was a nice night for grilling. Her brother muttered something, but I couldn't hear it over the music. Bach, I think. Maybe Vivaldi. It didn't matter. I led them to their table. Every place card carefully arranged. Every name etched in calligraphy. No labels this time. No failure. Just names. Just civility. I raised a glass before dinner. Thank you all for coming, I said. I know we've had differences, but I wanted to host tonight not to gloat, but to share what's possible. Sometimes failure isn't the end. It's just the beginning. They didn't clap, but they didn't speak either. The silence was enough. They ate in silence. It wasn't the kind of awkward, uncomfortable quiet you get when strangers don't know what to say. This was deeper, heavy, like the air between us was thick with all the things they'd ever said about me behind closed doors. And now they had to swallow those words with every bite of filet mignon. The backyard was perfect. I'd spent weeks preparing. Landscape lighting lit the stone walls in soft gold. The trees were wrapped in fairy lights, swaying gently in the breeze. A waterfall trickled into a koi pond off to the side, and the smell of cedar smoke from the custom-built grill gave everything a warm, nostalgic note. This wasn't just a barbecue. It was a reintroduction. I watched them from the far end of the table, her father shifting in his seat, her mother barely touching her wine, her brother scrolling his phone under the table like he was trying to remind himself that somewhere, someone still cared what he posted. They had questions. I could see it in their faces, but none of them wanted to be the first to ask. Finally, her mother broke the silence. "This is beautiful," she said, eyes darting around the yard. "You've done well for yourself." There it was, the first crack in the facade, a reluctant compliment wrapped in passive aggression. But I took it, smiled even. "Thank you," I said. "Takes a while to find peace, longer to build it." Her father leaned forward, resting his arms on the table like he was settling into an old debate. "So what do you do now exactly?" I almost laughed, not because it was a bad question, but because it reminded me of every time he'd asked me that before, back when I was building something he couldn't understand. Back when he thought tech startup meant unemployed with Wi-Fi. "I'm in private equity," I said calmly, "and software architecture, a bit of real estate on the side." He raised an eyebrow. "And all this came from that app thing you were working on back then?" "That was the start," I nodded. "It's not about the app, though. It's about owning the infrastructure, the tools people use without realizing who built them. I license the technology now. Quiet money." The phrase hit like a slap. Quiet money. He didn't know what to do with that. Her brother finally spoke. "So you're rich now, huh?" I looked at him, really looked at him. The kid who once joked about me not being able to afford the gas to drive Rachel to a wedding. The one who used to post vacation photos from yachts he didn't own. "No," I said slowly. "I'm free." That was when it shifted. The power. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about freedom. About knowing that I could walk away from any of this and still be fine. That I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The chef brought out dessert, lavender creme brulee with berries. Nobody touched it. After a while, her mother stood up. "Well," she said, brushing imaginary crumbs off her skirt, "this has been enlightening. I suppose we owe you an apology." I didn't answer right away. I just stood with her, hands in my pockets. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "You didn't believe in me. That's okay. You're not the first." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. They all left not long after that, filing out past the koi pond, past the fountain, past the stone columns that marked the edge of the life they said I'd never have. I stayed in the backyard long after the valets drove their cars away. The fire pit glowed low, casting shadows against the walls. I poured a whiskey, sat on the edge of the stone bench, and just listened. Silence. Not the kind you dread. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket. Still, soft, complete. The truth is, that night wasn't about them. Not really. It was about me proving something to the younger version of myself. The one who sat through those dinners feeling small, who doubted his worth every time someone raised an eyebrow or made a joke at his expense. That kid needed to know he made it. That he became someone strong, someone kind, someone whole. What they thought, it didn't matter anymore. Their opinions couldn't touch me. Not here. Not now. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. From her father. You didn't need to do all this to prove a point. But I see now, you did it for yourself. And I respect that. I was wrong about you. I can admit that now. I hope you find happiness, wherever life takes you. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer with old photographs and faded wedding vows I hadn't looked at in years. Not out of spite. Just closure. That's the thing people don't tell you about healing. It doesn't always come with a dramatic moment. Sometimes it comes in silence. In a backyard. Over creme brulee. When the people who once doubted you have nothing left to say. After the barbecue, the house felt too quiet. You'd think I'd enjoy the peace, but there was something about that silence afterward that felt different, like a storm had passed, and I was still standing in the middle of the wreckage, just waiting. The truth is, victory doesn't always feel like celebration. Sometimes, it feels like exhaustion. The days after were a blur of emails, check-ins, and business calls, but my mind kept drifting to the letter her father had sent, to the uncomfortable looks her family wore as they walked through the gates. I kept thinking about the man I was when they first met me. Young, eager, naive. I had wanted so badly to be accepted. And now, I didn't need their acceptance. I didn't even want it. But part of me still mourned the time I spent chasing it. One evening, maybe a week later, I took a walk through the neighborhood. Just me, no destination. I passed trimmed hedges, expensive cars and driveways, houses that looked just like mine. And I thought about how little any of it meant when Rachel and I were falling apart. All those years ago, I used to think success would heal me. That if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, earned enough, I could somehow rewrite history. I could make up for the nights I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Rachel texted someone else. For the dinners where I smiled while her family carved me up with compliments made of daggers. For every time I believed I was less. But healing doesn't come from proving people wrong. That's just the beginning. Real healing? It comes from choosing to stop defining yourself by what others said you couldn't be. It comes from learning to live for yourself, not in spite of them. A few months after the barbecue, I got a call from Rachel. Her name flashing on my phone did something to me. Not anger, not bitterness, just stillness. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up. Hello. A pause. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. I heard about the barbecue. I didn't answer. They're still talking about it, she said. You made quite the impression. I didn't do it for them. I know. Another pause. You look well. I saw the photos online. Someone posted a video. You really did it, didn't you? I did. She sighed. I used to think you were wasting your time. That all those nights at the computer meant you were pulling away. But now I see. I was the one drifting. I didn't say anything. I could hear her breathing, like she wanted to fill the silence, but couldn't find the right shape for her words. I wasn't kind to you, she finally said. And my family, they took cues from me. I see that now. I'm sorry. I let that hang in the air. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed to hear myself think. To ask myself, did I forgive her? And the answer, quietly, was yes. Not because she asked, but because I had to. I'm not angry anymore, I said. I think we both became who we needed to be after we let go. I guess I just needed to hear that, she whispered. We said goodbye. No plans to reconnect. No dramatic closure. Just two people on either end of a line, each finally able to release what they'd been carrying for too long. The seasons changed. The barbecue became a memory. The mansion? Just a house. I still lived there, still enjoyed it. But it didn't define me anymore. The real mansion, I realized, was the life I built inside myself. The one built on integrity, grit, and quiet nights of knowing I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. A friend once asked if I'd ever throw another party like that again. Another performance. Another statement. I shook my head. That wasn't about them, I said. It was about putting the past to bed. He smiled. And did it work? I thought for a moment. It didn't change the past, but it changed how I carry it. So here I am. A man once called a failure. A man whose name was spoken with pity and smugness behind closed doors. A man who used to believe that being loved meant being accepted. Now I know better. Being loved starts with loving yourself enough to walk away from people who diminish you, to build quietly, to rebuild with purpose, and to invite, not out of vengeance, but out of power, the kind of power that doesn't need applause, just a backyard, a fire pit, and the peace that comes when you no longer care who believes in you. Because you do, and that's enough.